Hey, isn't that impressive? I've got myself some neon, bitches. Actually, I haven't. I was bought some neon as a present by people that I like. And I was like, oh my God, that is amazing. So this is now going to be a thing that's on the NOTCAST. Today is number 311. It is Thursday. I think it's the 17th of August, 2023. So let's put this where it belongs. Oh, isn't that exciting? Oh, I bet you've never seen this before. You probably think I'm just stuck in a room, in a dungeon, and I never go anywhere and I never do anything. And that is, well, actually, if you give it any thought at all, that's not strictly true, because I was away this weekend, and I went to see The Wedding Present, Smith's fans' second favourite band. In Brighton, at the edge of the sea. This is an At the Edge of the Sofa t-shirt for their virtual festival during the COVID times, the dark years. And it was great, but I was out for 2 days, very, very sociable, around lots of people, all day, both days, and obviously gigs and stuff. And that meant that when I got back, I was like, I'm tired. I was like a blobfish. And not that any of you have been going, why hasn't Mark done an NOTCAST for a bit? Well, I was away and I was seeing a band, and that's the reason. And so I've now moved the neon sign over to there. Since today is the 17th of August 2023, it's also 2 years tonight. I had probably one of the scariest nights of my life. I had what's called a psychogenic seizure. And a psychogenic seizure is a blackout. They're quite rare. Somewhere between about 1 in 10,000 and 1 in 50,000 people have it. In fact, they're so rare that when I went to the hospital in A&E in the middle of the night, nobody that was in A&E was able to diagnose what it actually was. It took about 18 months of tests and things before it turned up. But I'm here, and I'm in, well, relatively one piece. And so there we are. Now today, 311, I'm going to be talking about the Smiths. And I'm going to be talking about what is widely regarded by me, I'm not sure if anyone else thinks of it as such, as their fifth album. Although really, it's 2 compilations. It is Louder Than Bombs and The World Won't Listen. This is the Smiths album that the world forgot, if that makes sense. I regard it as basically a Smiths studio album. Much like Morrissey's Bone and Drag, actually, but with a couple of extra songs on that perhaps maybe kind of I thought probably shouldn't have been on there. And the chronology around this, the timeline around this, gets pretty damn complicated, truth be told, because it kind of wraps itself around the Queen is Dead era, which I did in a previous episode a couple of months ago. And the reason why was the Queen is Dead was delayed by about 6 months after it was completed before it was released. And the Smiths didn't stop. They carried on writing and recording and doing all that kind of stuff, which meant that by the time that The Queen is Dead had come out, or the time The Queen is Dead did come out, the band had expanded their lineup and they had a fistful of extra tracks which were just about to release. Craig Gannon had joined the band on second guitar, and on the 5th of July 1986 the band played the Tube television show, and on the Tube television show they performed 2 songs. One, There Is a Light That Never Goes Out, from the just released Queen is Dead LP, and the second one, and it's released on this unofficial 7-inch EP, Help I Need Somebody, by a band called the Patels. Not a great name for an official band. Side 1 has Hand in Hand and Still Unwell, which are Hand in Glove and Still Ill, from the Tube in 1984. And on side 2, the side that is out here, we had Don't Lie There and Picnic, which is obviously There Is a Light That Never Goes Out, and a new song called Panic. Panic was inspired by something that happened on, I think, the 20th of June, 20th of July, 1986, the Chernobyl disaster, which means I've got the dates wrong. Let me check the dates. No, I haven't got the dates wrong. I had some dates wrong in my head. So the Chernobyl disaster happened on the 26th of April, or maybe 28th of April, 1986. And as a 13-year-old, I remember watching the news and going, I don't know why or how this is important, but I think this is important. And what it ended up to be was that I remember seeing all this fuzzy footage on the big thick televisions of what looked like something that didn't look quite right. And in the end, what it turned out to be was basically a kind of a nuclear meltdown, similar to the China Syndrome film from 1978, that took place in Russia in April 1986. And it was a little quiet as to if it even happened. I think the first time that anybody really knew that Chernobyl would happen was when scientists in somewhere like Norway, sorry people from Norway for being so vague about it, but they kind of noticed high levels of radiation in the atmosphere in their scientific testing. Russia being behind the Iron Curtain, so to speak, a communist dictatorship in all but name, hadn't told anybody that it had happened. Evacuated people out of Chernobyl, which I think had about 50,000 people in it, and almost all of them worked at the nuclear power plant, but didn't tell anybody it was happening. And it was only when the evidence became incontrovertible and irrefutable that it was broadcast and announced on the news that there'd been an accident at the Chernobyl nuclear reactor in Russia. This came on the BBC News, hourly radio news at that point. Morrissey and Mo were listening to it wherever they were. And then it went from the news that, oh, there's been a nuclear meltdown, China Syndrome type thing, the closest thing to, a massive, enormous, kind of unplanned, very worst, what's the worst that could happen kind of situation. Went to playing Wham's I'm Your Man on Radio 1 with Steve Wright in the afternoon. And they wrote, well, hang the DJ, it says nothing to me about my life. I think it would have been possibly appropriate to have played a slightly different song after that news. I think the news is a little more sober now. I always remember last year, actually, when the Queen died, and we were watching The Simpsons on Channel 4, and there was a bit where Homer gets a letter through the door, and he goes, I've got a letter, woohoo! And then all of a sudden it faded to black, and there was like, now comes an important announcement from Channel 4 or from Buckingham Palace, the Queen is dead. Take me back to dear old Blighty, indeed. It's the same kind of thing where the thing that was on the television around you, and suddenly it was how trivial huge amounts of life are, or huge amounts of life actually is really bloody trivial compared to everything else. And that's what inspired the Smiths to write Panic, which I think happened in April-May 1986. And it was then premiered live on the Tube on the 5th of July 1986. Captured on here, which was also the debut, I think, of the Craig Gannon lineup of the band, which is a five-person version of the group. And The Queen is Dead had just come out. They followed it up and went, well, are we going to release a single from the album? What's the single going to be? Not really sure, not going to tell anybody, etc., etc. And then it turned out that they were going to actually go for something completely different indeed, which was a shocker, as you might say. And thus, hot on the heels of the release of the Queen is Dead album, we then got another new song, as if not content with releasing what is regarded by many people as their best LP, although the Smiths will disagree with you on that. We have this new song, Panic, and a new lineup with Craig in the band. Now, the band were planning on playing the US and touring in to support the Queen is Dead, hence the live CD, live in Boston, I think it is, that's on the Queen is Dead reissue. And Andy Rourke had left the Smiths, informed by a note on his car. And a bass player called Guy Pratt, who then went on to play some of the best bass lines you've ever heard that you don't know who's written them. I'm just going to think of a couple. Ain't No Doubt by Jimmy Nail. Sophie Ellis-Bextor's Murder on the Dance Floor, and obviously Pink Floyd. Guy Pratt was a bass player in Pink Floyd between 1987 and 1994, and then played with both David Gilmour and Nick Mason to this day as bass player to the stars, to at least 2/3 of the surviving members of Pink Floyd. Guy Pratt was brought in on bass to replace Andy Rourke. Spent a week in the Smiths learning the songs, getting used to it, and then all of a sudden there was a change of heart and Andy was back in the group. And then there was some discussion about possibly Craig Gannon joining the group to thicken out the band sound, and then he did join the group. So we had a 5-piece Smiths, which allowed Johnny to play, I think, more of a lead guitar as opposed to a lead and a rhythm guitar. Now I saw Johnny Marr at the Tunbridge Wells Forum on the 27th of July this year, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And the thing that struck me just loud and clear is watching that is just what an incredibly versatile player he is in terms of how he plays guitar that most people don't really give him credit for. I think of how Johnny Marr plays guitar. It actually really reminds me of somebody like Nile Rodgers, the way that he blends kind of rhythm and melody together and does so in a manner that, and then you kind of listen to that way of playing and that type of music, and you can, as soon as you think about that, and you can hear the influence of Nile Rodgers and David Bowie and things like Let's Dance and so on, and Chic and Sister Sledge and all that type of stuff, you can hear it. But it's only when somebody points out, you go, do you know? And you're like, oh my God, yeah, completely, absolutely is. Even to the way that something like, and I'm leaning forward into a future episode here, Death of a Disco Dancer from Strange Ways, Here We Come, is to me hugely influenced by disco itself and things like I Feel Love, that kind of modular synth, heavily repetitive sound that makes the rhythm into a melody in itself. And then you listen to something like, Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others, Barbarism Begins at Home. You kind of get that sense of the ability to turn melody itself into a rhythm and to turn the rhythm into a form of punctuation. Otherwise, it's all like E.E. Cummings and there's no punctuation and it just goes along in a flat monotone and there are no commas and no full stops and no exclamation marks forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. So Panic... Quick, get back to talking about Panic. Panic released in August 1986, got to number 11 in the UK charts. Here is the Rough Trade 7-inch single, and to further kind of highlight the fact that it really is just a song from the Queen is Dead era. It's backed with a song called Vicar in a Tutu, which you will have seen and heard on the Queen is Dead album. Now, for me, when you buy a single, and this is why I don't have lots of early Guns N' Roses singles, but when you buy a single, you're not just buying the single, you're buying the single for the B-sides, you're buying the single for the songs that aren't on the album. So here is the 12-inch of Vicar in a Tutu, and like all Smiths 12 inches from here on in, comes in a special monotone single colour sleeve that matches up with the label. It really is a kind of like a complete work of art, and it's backed with Vicar in a Tutu and a new track called The Dre's Train, on there, which you will know, and it is one of the few Smiths songs that never made it onto a Smiths album during the band's lifespan, although The Dre's Train does appear on the Rank Live album for a long period of time. That's pretty much the only place you could get it. And in Germany, I think this is Germany, Panic came in a slightly different configuration. You still have the sleeve here, and you still have the photograph of, it doesn't say who it is, but I'm sure we'll find out. Richard Bradford from a television show, and it came on a 12-inch. This is a lovely shade of blue vinyl, and this is backed with 2 tracks which you may have heard of. One is There Is a Light That Never Goes Out, and the other one is The Queen Is Dead, further kind of doubling down on the sense that Panic is really a song that is and very closely tied to the band's Queen is Dead era. Now, I have no idea how much this is worth, probably a lot of money. I don't bother thinking about how much records are worth. I think about how much records mean to me, which is a completely different metric, which means that some of the records that I own are very important to me, but utterly worthless if you want to get any money selling them second hand. In Greece, Panic got a slightly different release, this time as part of a 5-track Big Mouth Strikes Again EP, and this came on boring black vinyl, thanks to Virgin Records, the most appropriately named Smiths record company, Virgin. And it's Big Mouth Strikes Again, backed with non-album tracks Panic, The Dre's Train, Money Changes Everything, and Unlovable. Money Changes Everything being a song that later appeared on The World Won't Listen, but only on the CD and only on some of the versions of the CD. Panic was a really great song. It very clearly wears its influences on its sleeve, and its influences are T-Rex and Meryl Garou. You can't muck about with that. That's what it is. And when the band were recording Panic, Johnny Marr said to the band's producer, I think John Porter is his name, he said, make a T-Rex record. And that's exactly what you got with Panic. You've got a T-Rex record, but played by the Smiths. And it's a marvellous song. I love the lyric. And the lyric is the kind of song that I was talking about this the other day with somebody. Is about, you think about the cultural homogeny of America in the world, and the way that there's a dominance around American culture, which obviously was parodied in the KLF's America What Time Is Love, with a list of places like, Toledo, Salt Lake, New York, Massachusetts, Milwaukee, etc. This is, Dublin, Dundee, Humberside, Birmingham, those kind of places that don't often get talked about in the popular kind of world, because they're places that don't really exist. When people think of London, or more when people think of Britain, they think of London. They don't think of anywhere else. I think maybe of Manchester, because it's got the cool bands. And as Henry Rollins said, when you go to Manchester and it's raining, you understand how Morrissey happens. But when people think about Britain, they think about London. And I'm always reminded of when, I think it was Motley Crue played Donington Monsters of Rock, and the band's roadies had forgotten to update the sticky tape that was on the foot of the mic stand. And so Vince Neil spent most of his show going, "You're right, London." It's like, we're in Donington, we're like 150 miles away from London. What the fuck are you talking about? And that's where you get the cultural homogeny, where people think that, when you think about Paddington, for example, even Paddington, it's set in London, and the version of London that it's set in is a pretty dull version of London. It's like streets where you'd have to be a multimillionaire or a Russian oligarch in which to live. And that's why when I watch a film like Sightseers, the Ben Wheatley film, I think about, well, that's a world I recognise. That's a world that I see. Whereas when I went to Chicago, most people were just like, well, I'm on the train going to work. And I'm like, that street's in the fucking Matrix. There should be Trinity and Neo and Morpheus and Agent Smith and a van, and it should be raining, and there should be bullet time. Whereas most people are just like, Chicago, innit? Get out of the way, I'm going to work. That type of thing. And that's where Panic, I thought, really, really kind of struck out to me as a song that was about the world I recognised, which is the DJ. The music that he constantly played said nothing to me about my life. So my life at the time, when I was listening to the Smiths, obviously I still do listen to the Smiths on a frequent basis, there was a lot less certainty around, well, who am I, where am I, what am I going to do, am I going to love anybody, who am I going to love, what's the gender of that person going to be, am I going to be gay, am I going to be straight, am I going to be in between, am I going to be rich, am I going to be poor, am I going to have hair, pretty obviously no hair. What kind of person am I going to be when I grow up? And there were all these questions which I didn't have answers to in the songs. And yet it was like, the music that they constantly play, it says nothing to me about my life, hang the DJ, hang the DJ. Not obviously, of course, advocating anybody actually hanging a DJ, but probably more likely just kind of just laying out very clearly that music as a cultural thing should speak to everybody in the way that governments should represent everybody and not just the voters. Music that's popular or popular music should reflect all types of tastes. And often people will go, 1995 Britpop, best time ever to be a teenager. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. It was pretty rotten. Zig and Zag were making singles. Okay, that Dem Girls by Zig and Zag is a fantastic track. But, maybe things like, Boop and Mr. Blobby and Barbie Girl by Aqua, these type of things were also successful, and they were also in the charts. And the chart should reflect music that everybody likes, including the music that not so many people like, I think. I spent huge chunks of my time kind of going, I don't understand how or why Band X, whoever Band X are popular. I don't get it. I listen to it and I'm just like, it's crap. But other people are probably sat there crying at the integrity of the lyrics from Ed Sheeran, and I'm just sat there going, not very good, but okay, knock yourself out, have a great time. I wish it did to you, or I wish it did to me, what it does to you, but it doesn't, which is good because there's only so many gigs I can go to, and some nights there's still 3 gigs on it. I can't split myself into 3 parts. So the Dre's Train was the B-side, and that actually is a really interesting instrumental workout. Whereas Panic was seen as an attack upon dance music. Around about this time, Morrissey regretfully said that reggae is vile. He may have only been thinking of UB40 when he said that. And, you know, if it had just said UB40 are vile, sure, I'm never going to disagree with anybody about that. But he said all reggae is vile. And whilst it's not really my type of thing, I can totally get why people like that sense of repetition and groove, which of course is very frequent in things like I Feel Love and in disco. So after that, Panic, which peaked at number 11 in October 1986, the Smiths went on their Queen is Dead tour with Craig Gallen on guitar, playing the UK and ending the tour with some shows in London before finally kind of rounding out at Manchester Free Trade Hall. Now, in the midst of this tour, they released yet another single. I know, a shocker. This was Ask, and this is the Smiths single that probably has the most number of different covers and configurations of any of them, actually. So Ask is a controversial song in the Smiths canon. It is a song that, depending upon when you buy it and on which record label it is, it's either written by Morrissey and Marr, or it's written by Morrissey and Marr and Craig Gallen. It's backed with Cemetery Gates, which you will have heard already on The Queen is Dead. Not exactly doing very much for your idea that it's not just another single that just happened to be left off The Queen is Dead. And Youth of Joyce there on the cover. Ask was mixed by Steve Lillywhite. Now, the reason it says it was mixed by Steve Lillywhite, because the version was recorded with John Porter, which has not yet been released. I think it's been bootlegged. And it was then, they went into the studio and they re-recorded it with Steve Lillywhite, I think, did some of that. And it was then recorded in London and released. It's got some of the best, funniest lyrics, which I've heard. Because a lot of people think, oh, the Smiths, heaven knows I'm miserable now. They don't realise how fucking funny some of these lyrics are. You know, if you were a standard musician, I doubt anybody as profound as Neil Young would come out with a lyric like writing warm summer days indoors, writing frightening verse to a buck-toothed girl in Luxembourg, and then following it up with a chorus of, if it's not love, then it's the bomb that will bring us together. And of course, at the time, 1986, and this follows on from the themes that are in Panic, is Panic was inspired by Nuclear Meltdown. Ask was kind of inspired by the idea of certain imminent nuclear destruction, the 4-minute warning, and then everything would be vaporized. That's certainly how I remember living, and I remember watching Threads on television and being absolutely aghast. Is that what could really happen if there's a nuclear bomb? How could anybody even possibly conceive of having those? I think it was Ronald Reagan watched a show, and I can't remember what it was, about life after the nuclear detonation inside a nuclear winter. And he was like so affected by that show. He started the talks about mutually assured destruction and destroying certain amounts of arms and reducing and de-escalating the brinksmanship and the one-upsmanship of the nuclear race. Which is, interesting, but possibly not relevant to the Smiths. Instead, Ask here. Here's the UK 12-inch version of Ask, black vinyl. This time, Ask, which is 3 minutes, I think. 3 minutes. No, 2 minutes 59 seconds. So 179 seconds of music, one and done. Back to Cemetery Gates, and then possibly the worst song the Smiths ever recorded, Golden Lights. It's a terrible shame that Golden Lights exists. Written by Twinkle, whoever the hell she is. It's a terrible shame. But the band were pushing their abilities as far as they could do it. Now, Johnny Marr regards Golden Lights as a low point. That's what he said in December 1992. But what we did have, you see, for Ask, was a slightly different version, was released in Germany because in Germany it wasn't Ask, it was Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others, backed with Frankly Mr. Shankly and the Dre's Train. This is the German 12-inch. I think it was only released in Germany. This is a very lovely orange shade of vinyl of Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others. Surprisingly, not played live by the Smiths apart from one show at Brixton Academy in December 1986. And since Youth of Joyce was used on the German sleeve of Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others, Ask, when it was released in Germany, got a different sleeve. And so in Germany, what we got for Ask was this photograph from the film The Leather Boys, and this is Colin Campbell. This was backed with cemetery gates and golden lights, and if I remember correctly, this is a clear vinyl 12-inch here of Ask. The Leather Boys does turn up later on in Smith's mythology as well, because the Leather Boys is used as one of the films that's in the background, I think during the video for Girlfriend in a Coma. But a good idea is never lost, and this was used later on. And again, thinking about all the Smiths imagery here, and again that kind of sepia, half-remembered version of reality. Think about all of the iconography that they have. All of these images kind of have this bubbled under repressed sexuality, this idea of longing and desire and an inability to realize it. And you can kind of, when you look at this, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but you look into that photograph there, and there's a kind of a sense of repressed simmering desire and lust, which ties in with the lyric about nature as a language can't you read, which is, by the way, a paraphrase from Alan Bennett's 1978's Me, I'm Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And in Me, I'm Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Alan Bennett wrote, nature has a language, you see, if only we'd learn to read it. The Smiths' influences are all there if you learn to read them. It's very obvious what they are. And so we have this fabulous single, which, by the way, has the most wonderful breakdown halfway through. It just stops for about 8 bars, or maybe 4 bars, and there's just like this lovely kind of lilting guitar and seagulls, and then it starts up again as if that section never ever happened. And what people forget is, well, especially when talk about AI, is, Britain and the world needs weird pop stars that do weird things like that, not for a reason, but because they sound good. That's what they think they should be doing. They don't necessarily always do it, of course. Now, in my collection, I have added the 12-inch single of The Queen Is Dead, which was released in 2017, and probably shouldn't be mentioned there. Instead, what we had was a couple of other things that did happen. One of which is, and let me quickly remember where I stuck it on my list of things, we have the Smiths on tour. And they played a number of shows, which saw a bootleg, unofficial double LP, the Smiths, Brixton Academy, Friday. It says the 20th of October 1986. It was the 24th of October 1986. This is the whole show, I think, apart from one song, and for some reason features some Billy Bragg on side 4. And it was recorded at Brixton Academy. This one has your standard full Queen Is Dead set list. Queen Is Dead, Panic, I Want the One I Can't Have, Vicar on a Tutu, There Is the Light That Never Goes Out. It was always played in the middle of the set, never as an encore. And then Ask, Rush Home Ruffians, Shakespeare's Sister, Frankly Mr. Shankly, The Boy with the Thorn in His Side, What She Said, Is It Really So Strange, London, Meat Is Murder, I Know It's Over, The Dre's Train, How Soon Is Now, Still Ill, and finally Big Mouth Strikes Again, which would be the last song on stage that most people would have seen the Smiths perform. This has a handwritten section from the previous owner. I bought a job lot of Smiths material from somebody I used to work with, who said, all the Smith vinyl for £150. I looked at it very quickly, was there about 150 records in there, and I went, okay, yep, I'm going with that. That'll be good. Again, you can see that kind of, that it's got the Smiths ethos in there for an unofficial release. So I'm really pleased that I managed to pick that one up. There is also a posthumous and the only official Smiths live album released as a standalone release, Rank, with a double gatefold picture here. That's taken from the Manchester GMEX show, which was broadcast on the radio. and it comes in a sleeve which features Morrissey and Marr there performing live, and as a slight kind of olive branch to Johnny Marr, the Dre's Train is on it, making its first LP appearance on a Smiths album, as well as featuring Rush Home Ruffians with Marie's the Name, his latest flame, the Elvis song, as a medley of the two running together. This was recorded at the National Ballroom, Kilburn, 23rd of October 1986. It was broadcast on British radio for BBC Radio 1's Live in Concert in an edited 1 hour form, and various different broadcasts also included How Soon Is Now and There Is a Light That Never Goes Out, and I think frankly Mr. Shankly. So you can get an extra 3 songs if you look on YouTube, but the version here is about 56 minutes of live Smiths on stage, and they sound furious and amazing. But of course the light that burns twice as bright burns half as long, and the Smiths burnt so very, very brightly because this was their last tour. They didn't tour again after this. They did play live a little bit, but they didn't tour. And so Rank is is an essential part of the Smiths package, and because the Smiths owed an album to Rough Trade Records, the contractual obligation that they had was to release the live album, which effectively kind of discharged at least part of that responsibility. This was released in 1988, somewhat oddly competing with a solo album called Viva Hate by the Morrissey. So yeah, strange times, but so be it. And also recorded in Kilburn on this bootleg single here is, well, the radio session versions of Half a Person and Cemetery Gates, recorded for the John Peel Show on the 17th of December 1986, and I Know It's Over, recorded in Kilburn. Things went a little bit quiet. There was a one-off show that the band played, and that was at the Brixton Academy on, I think, the 12th of December 1986. It was meant to be at the Royal Albert Hall on the 14th of November. Craig had left the group. It hadn't really been fully announced or kind of talked about, as was the Smiths' way. Things were a little bit quiet and a little bit secretive, and people just kind of disappeared in a very kind of communist, unpersoned way. You'd suddenly get Photoshop versions of band lineups with guys just empty holes. But there was a car crash, and Johnny was in a car crash, and the car was absolutely totaled. And this was a real moment of revelation for Johnny. As he describes in his autobiography, Set the Boy Free, he kind of realised that there were things that he needed to put into perspective. And part of the reason that I think he felt so, what's the word I'm thinking of here? Part of the reason that the accident may have happened was because of overwork and exhaustion. And he felt that he needed to take a step back and needed to get a manager in to help manage the band, because he was doing, alongside Morrissey, managing, hiring things, signing paychecks, making sure things happened. Tours were booked, flights were booked, everything happened. And frankly was being overworked in a way that is not sustainable. He said that, he remembered he was trying to work out the bridge to, I think, There Is a Light That Never Goes Out. And there was a knock at the door, and there was somebody that needed to be paid for the studio tapes. And at the same point, he had a phone call from somebody saying they were being taken to court, not for paying a bill. Hang on. Right, just got an important text message. Had to attend to that. Back in the so-called real world now. And we had the next release. We go into early 1987, January 1987, with the release of the single Shoplifters of the World Unite, the third non-album single by the Smiths in a row. And this, I don't know when this was recorded, obviously recorded by the Four Piece Band. This, by the way, is I think the first publicity photograph of Elvis ever taken, before it had a hit or anything, so, which obviously Morrissey then tilted to make it look a little bit more dramatic. And it features Half a Person and London on the B-side. So quickly, let's go into the 12-inch here. Shoplifters of the World Unite is not actually advocating shoplifting. It's got a very interesting approach to things, because okay, so you know, the old-fashioned approach about unions, workers of the world unite, take over, overthrow the bourgeoisie, unite, etc., seize back the means of production, all that type of stuff. It's kind of a very low-key, somewhat domestic approach to going, you know, try to live in the real world instead of a shell. But it's mocking and a little bit silly. And that is very, very underrated, actually, in terms of the approach that it will take. There's a joke upon, or a wordplay on the phrase shirtlifters. Shirtlifters being a slang for gay people. The rumours were that, you know, Morrissey was gay, etc., and the idea that he was a shirtlifter, etc., all that bollocks. And it was also a play upon Karl Marx's workers of the world unite and overthrow the owners of the means of production kind of view. And it's also, by the way, the first song of the Smiths catalogue I ever saw played live by Morrissey at the Birmingham Aston Villa Leisure Centre on the 11th of February 1995. That show was filmed for the Introducing Morrissey video, and it was used in some shots, but not many. The vast majority of the Introducing Morrissey live DVD and VHS was shot at Blackpool and Sheffield on the 7th and 8th of February 1995. So the first song I heard played live from the Smiths' body of work was Shoplifters of the World Unite by Morrissey, and it was wonderful, actually. I thought I'd never get to hear any of those songs played live. I'd never get to experience even the slightest shadow of what the Smiths could be. Even though obviously seeing solo Morrissey was one thing, seeing Morrissey as a solo artist play songs by the Smiths was revelatory at that point in time. I thought it'd never happen. Shoplifters of the World Unite wasn't played live on stage by the Smiths at any concerts. It was played on the Tube. It was played on a couple of TV shows, but it wasn't played, you know, on a tour or anything like that. It was a Smith song that also, like its subsequent single, felt perhaps a little bit lost by the world. And on the B-side, we have Half a Person, which very, very clearly kind of shows the influence of the Velvet Underground on the band. It's a very gentle, very relaxed, circular song. It almost feels flimsy, but it isn't. It's simple as opposed to flimsy. And we also have on the B-side as well, London, the nearest thing to heavy metal that the Smiths ever got. I think it's 2 minutes and 17 seconds long. I just have to quickly check the thing on the back. Oh no, London is 2 minutes 6 seconds, and it's just an absolute banger. Put bluntly, again, London was the second song I saw performed live by Morrissey at the London Drury Lane Theatre on the 26th of February 1995, which was again unexpected and completely tore the roof off the venue, if that makes sense. We're like, yeah, it's very good. It's Morrissey, you know, playing Billy Budd, Have a Go at Merchant, Spring Hill Dream. London, he's playing fucking London. Admittedly in London, but he's playing London. So that was quite an experience, it's fair to say. And both of those songs, Half a Person and London, very, very clearly tie with the theme of you can never go home again. The lyric that is also in some of the other Smith songs from around that time. Half a Person is, 16 clumsy and shy, I went to London and I booked myself into the YWCA. London is very clearly about you left your girlfriend grieving on the platform with this really ragged notion that you'd return home, but did you see the jealousy in the eyes of the ones that you had to leave behind? Do you think you've made the right decision this time? Both of those songs very clearly about going from Manchester to London to carve out some kind of future. And I mean, obviously I did that. I grew up in Birmingham at the age of 27. Birmingham had become a place that to me felt that it was no longer home. It didn't fit. It was like a pair of shoes that I had outgrown or had grown in different ways to me. And I had to go to London. I had to change my life, and I had to make a break with negative patterns of behaviour. that were surrounding me at that point in time. I was listening to a podcast on WTF with Mark Maron. We're interviewing and talking with Abigail Disney, one of the heirs to the Disney bazillions, who kept the name. And she was talking about how if you're an addict, if you're an alcoholic or a drug addict, whatever form of addiction it is, it's very, very difficult to be successful in that break unless you change the environment that goes around you. So you have to change your clothes, your hair, your face, as Dancing in the Dark said. But also what you have to do is to change your environment so that you can't lapse into the old forms of behaviour. You can't say, well, if I go here, I'll meet people, they'll sell me drugs, or they'll give me sex, or they'll sell me drink, those type of things. So you think about the things and the behaviours which are making your life difficult or unpleasant, and then you move yourself geographically out of the catchment area of those behaviours. Sure, if you move to London, you know, you can find drink and sex and drugs and whatever. But for me, certainly what I needed to do is I needed to change my world and start again without the baggage of history, effectively be able to go, things have gone wrong too many times, like Tony Hancock said in his suicide note. But things have gone wrong too many times. You have to press a button, reset, start again, and go at it from a new angle. And that's exactly what I did when I moved down to London. And London, the song, and Half a Person kind of take two sides of the same coin to say the same thing. And to go, look, this just wasn't, this wasn't the way things should have been. Here's a 7-inch of Shoplifters of the World Unite. This is a German version, by the way, and it comes on a very fetching shade of blue. I'm beginning to think that there are no Smiths releases which don't come in coloured vinyl, at least somewhere in the world. In fact, why the Smiths don't do a 7-inch singles box set, for example, and make them coloured vinyl, do all the, I don't know. I really don't know. And here is my UK copy of Shoplifters of the World with the postcards in. This one's backed with Half a Person. And I've also got a 12-inch. Now I'm going to guess that this 12-inch is a German 12-inch. I'm going to guess it's coloured vinyl, even though it hasn't got the sticker on it saying Ein Farberglatten Vinyl. But this is almost definitely a colour. I don't know what colour it's going to be because I've not looked at it for a while. I'm guessing green or blue. And do you know what? It's both. It is green marble vinyl. Oh my word. I'm sure that's worth a fair bit of money. But to me, it's what the record's worth to me. It's what the record means to me. It's not anything more than that. And again, this is Shoplifters of the World Unite on Line Records. Backed with, again, London and Half a Person. Now, the curious thing about London and Half a Person is that both of them are BBC radio sessions, I think. And I think they were both recorded on the 17th of December, 1986. And whilst undoubtedly the Smiths did try studio versions of the tracks, they decided to release radio session versions. Now, if I'm completely wrong, that's okay. Please forgive me. In fact, I am completely wrong because it's the B-sides of the next single for the BBC sessions. Although I think Half a Person was recorded for the BBC at the same time. Instead, what we got was album 5 by the Smiths, which is actually their second compilation. This is The World Won't Listen, released in the gap in between Shoplifters of the World Unite and the next single, Sheila Take A Bow. This also features one previously unreleased song, which wasn't strictly previously unreleased. So this is a compilation of the non-album and singles tracks from Shakespeare's Sister in early 1985 up to Shoplifters of the World Unite in January 1987. So this has Panic, Ask London, it has the, Big Mouth Strikes Again, Shakespeare's Sister, There Is a Light That Never Goes Out, which was a single in some territories, only France and Australia, mind you, Shoplifters of the World Unite, The Boy with a Thorn in His Side, which is the single mix, which is ever so slightly different, but I can't tell the difference, Asleep, Unlovable, Half a Person, Stretch Out and Wait, that's taken from the B-side of Shakespeare's Sister, but I think the vocal on Stretch Out and Wait is different. It's a different alternate take, which is all the lies that you make up, what's at the back of your mind, whereas this one is on the High Rise Estates, what's at the back of your mind. And then there's That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, Oscillate Wildly, and a track called You Just Haven't Earned It Yet Baby, and finally Rubber Ring. So we've got the four B-sides from The Queen Is Dead. Rubber Ring, which is a deconstruction of a fan and band relationship, the idea of music as a rubber ring that you cling to when you're lost in the world around you, and the songs are the things that keep you afloat while you could drown in the world. Asleep, and sadly, I really don't like the way that they do this, but there's a crossfade between Rubber Ring and Asleep, which is preserved on Louder Than Bombs, but isn't on The World Won't Listen, which really, really needs to be there, because effectively you have two songs faded apart and divorced from each other when they should sit together. Asleep is a kind of like a hymn or a concept of suicide, but a sleepy blackness or bleakness, the idea of, and this is the thing with suicide, and I probably should have gone to trigger warning right at the front, but I didn't realise I was going to talk about it. Although I did talk about it in a previous episode, is the idea of, if one of the things that makes suicide difficult is that it's really fucking hard to kill yourself. And I don't speak from personal experience about that, but it is. Your body has this strange knack of mostly staying alive and working really hard to do it on a purely instinctual level. Now there is an extra track that's on the CD of The World Won't Listen, and here's the CD edition of The World Won't Listen, which isn't on this version, but is on the WEA version, and that is the track Money Changes Everything. And what you will see is, and let me just quickly check here, no, it isn't on this version, as the cover art for The World Won't Listen is bastardized and bowdlerized is the word, and shrunk down to fit on a CD. As you can see, the colours are different, the sepia tone's different, and you just have this one person kind of staring off into the far distance. Now, the strange thing about The World Won't Listen is, firstly, obviously, it's a different mix of Stretch Out and Wait, but also there's a track called You Just Haven't Earned It Yet, Baby. And You Just Haven't Earned It Yet, Baby was possibly intended to be a single instead of Shoplifters, The World Unites. Apparently, a number of mislabeled white label test pressings, about 900 or so, were sent to the shops before Shoplifters was chosen as the A side. So there are 900 copies or thereabouts of You Just Haven't Earned It Yet, Baby on 12-inch. There are several £100s. I don't have one, and I'm more than okay about that, because I'd rather have several £100 than a record that I just go, yeah, it's nice, but I'd rather have the money. The World Won't Listen, and Morrissey says, by the way, that this is his favourite cover art, and he describes the fact that it was truncated into just this one image for the CD as one of his biggest regrets, and he's really not a fan of that. Now, the other thing that I will add to this is, in my opinion, this and the subsequent release are the missing fifth Smiths LP. And between this and Louder Than Bombs, you have an amazing fifth album that I really, really wish we all knew existed and had, but instead I've had to create using playlists. The cover is taken from a book called The Style and Spirit of the Early Beatles and Their Fans by Jürgen Vollmer. So this photograph is taken in Berlin in about 1961. 1962, and the strange and unusual thing about The World Won't Listen is there was also a double LP edition of this that was released in Australia, which scoops up some extra tracks and B-sides which were only previously on Hatful of Hollow and were not otherwise available in Australia, which kind of makes The World Won't Listen as an album effectively kind of like two sides of the same coin, with its then subsequent Smiths album release, Louder Than Bombs, which is effectively The World Won't Listen, but in American form. I prefer the cover art to Louder Than Bombs. I prefer the name Louder Than Bombs, because by the time that The World Won't Listen came out, The World Won't Listen charted at number 2 in February 1987. And you can't have an album that charts at number 2 and then call it The World Won't Listen, because the world is bloody well listening, loud and clear. You've got a number 2 album in the charts. You're playing to several thousand people a night. Your singles are going into the top 10. The world is listening, loud and bloody clear. So stop moaning about it. Still, I've always found Morrissey a contrary bugger, to say the least. Instead, what we had in the UK, rather than the release of Louder Than Bombs, was the last non-album Smiths single, Sheila Take A Bow. Here's two 12 inches, slightly different shades. One of them, unsurprisingly, is German, and one of them, unsurprisingly, is almost definitely a coloured vinyl edition. Let's just quickly check. I'm guessing... No, it's a white. I was expecting a pink, but it's not. It's a white. So what we have, Sheila Take A Bow, backed with Is It Really So Strange and Sweet and Tender Hooligan. This is a fabulous song. It's got the wonderful line, kick the grime of the world in the crotch, dear, and don't go home tonight. Come out and find the ones that you love and who love you. There is a... It was the version that's on here was recorded in Good Earth, London, in January 1987. There was an earlier version that was recorded the 13th of December 1986, the day after the last ever Smiths gig, which has Sandy Shaw backing vocals on. And presumably the band also at that point recorded studio versions of Is It Really So Strange and Sweet and Tender Hooligan, which, by the way, both of the versions on the B-side here were recorded for the BBC, produced by John Porter for the John Peel Show on the 17th of December 1986. So there are studio versions of Is It Really So Strange and Sweet and Tender Hooligan, but for some reason they didn't pass muster, and instead they used the BBC versions on the B-sides. Not the last time that the Smiths will use BBC sessions for B-sides and extra tracks. We have a cover star, Candy Darling, which is taken from, undoubtedly from by Andy Warhol, courtesy the Andy Warhol Studios. And we have a sleeve here, an inner sleeve, which we're told, which is pretty exciting, that features the lyrics of the three songs, Sheila Take A Bow, Is It Really So Strange, and Sweet and Tender Hooligan. And Is It Really So Strange, by the way, picks up the Smiths story. So as mentioned before, Half a Person and the other track on that particular 12-inch, London, are all about leaving the North and going to London and carving out a new life. Is It Really So Strange does exactly the same thing with I left the North, I travelled south, I found a tiny house, I can't help the way that I feel. And yeah, there you go. Of course, he left during the course of the song, the three verses, he leaves the North and he travels south 3 times. The first time he finds a tiny house. The second time he gets confused and kills a horse. And the third time he gets confused and he kills a nun, enough to make a shy and retiring Buddhist reflect and plan a mass murder indeed. He also loses his bag at Newport Pagnell, which I always think about every time I go to Newport Pagnell, which is a service station. It's not an exciting one. I don't go very often. On the back of the 12-inch, the inner sleeve also contains the 5 to-date canon Smiths albums: The Smiths, The Meat Is Murder, The Hatful of Hollow, The Queen Is Dead, and The World Won't Listen. There. What a gorgeous little package this is. The thing is, the Smiths, because they only existed 5 years, I mean, in terms of actual tangible dates, they went from about early 1982 to, in terms of proper existence, probably around about the 19th of May 1987. The Smiths existed for 5 years. It wasn't enough time for them to go rotten. They never lost it. They just stayed good all the way through, and they split before they besmirched their discography with terrible cover versions of Cilla Black or Twinkle, which those songs never existed. In Germany, Sheila Take A Bow got a white vinyl 12-inch release. Hello, I'm white vinyl. I'm staggeringly expensive and utterly useless. There. But at the time that these things came out, you know, you could pick up a coloured vinyl Smiths 12-inch for £5. I'd have no idea what the value is of these to record collectors these days. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. There was also, of course, the 7-inch of Sheila Take A Bow, backed with Is It Really So Strange, Rough Trade 196. There it is. And what we found with these tracks is that they, especially, they come back to repeated ideas that are dotted like, you know, little nuggets all the way through the Smiths discography. Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now and Sheila Take A Bow are both songs about rejecting the working world and the ideas and conceptions that people have for you as a child. It's going, no, I'm going to follow my own path and I'm going to do my own thing. The B-side, Is It Really So Strange, about leaving the north and travelling south, also picked up in Half a Person in London. And finally, Sweet and Tender Hooligan picks up the theme of juvenile delinquency and threatening behaviour and hanging around in gangs, which is picked up in, amongst many other things, What She Said, Rush Home Ruffians, and a number of other Smith songs as well. So these are all songs which revisit old and former glories of the band, but they do it in new ways. It doesn't feel like Morris is repeating himself. It feels like he's exploring the same ideas from different perceptions. In Germany, Sheila Take A Bow got a 7-track CD single release. Hello! One of the first CDs which features the tracks Sheila Take A Bow, Is It Really So Strange, Sweet and Tender Hooligan, Shoplifters, The World Unite, Half a Person, Panic, and London. Apparently all tracks produced by Johnny Marr, which isn't strictly true. Something tells me that if the versions of Is It Really So Strange and Sweet and Tender Hooligan on this were the official Johnny Marr recordings, or John Porter recordings, is that this CD would be worth a lot more money and I would have heard about it. They're just recycled BBC sessions, and they're inside the sleeve for Sheila Take A Bow. You get the photograph that appeared on the Shoplifters Take the World Shoplifters of the World Unite promo 12-inch from America, which I don't have, again because it's expensive and I didn't buy it at the time. This whole period kind of wraps up with the 5th studio album by the Smiths. Hang on, I've already mentioned the 5th. This is the 6th. No, it isn't. This is a compilation released in America called Louder Than Bombs. This was issued in April 1987. And to prevent it being imported into the UK at a staggering cost, it was also later released on CD in the UK. So here is the American Sire Records Rough Trade double vinyl LP, and here is the Rough Trade CD of Louder Than Bombs. And Louder Than Bombs, by the way, has a very interesting kind of career. There are a number of exclusive tracks on each one of the releases. So The World Won't Listen has the exclusive vocal of Stretch Out and Wait, the 7-inch fade of That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, and the 7-inch version of The Boy with the Thorn in His Side. The Louder Than Bombs has on it exclusive and unavailable anywhere else, at least on a Smith studio record, because Louder Than Bombs is a compendium of both Hatful of Hollow and The World Won't Listen, taking out the BBC session tracks mostly and presenting a selection of songs which haven't appeared on any Smiths album yet. So this is a kind of like a double album, best of Hatful of Hollow and World Won't Listen, all the songs that haven't been on any other American release. So at that point, Hatful of Hollow had missed the world completely. So this opens with Is It Really So Strange, Sheila Take A Bow, Shoplifters, The World Unite, Sweet and Tender Hooligan, Half a Person, and London. Side B is Panic. Then you get Girl Afraid, reprising its appearance from Hatful of Hollow. Although this is I think the studio version of it, if the radio session is on Hatful of Hollow. Shakespeare's Sister, William, It Was Really Nothing, You Just Haven't Earned It Yet, Baby, which I think is an ever so slightly different mix. And Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now, obviously also on Hatful of Hollow. Then side 3 for Ask, Golden Lights, Oscillate Wildly, the first appearance on a Smiths album of the studio recording of These Things Take Time, because I think the version that's on Hatful of Hollow is a Peel session. And then also Hand in Glove, no, not Hand in Glove, why have I put Hand in Glove there? Rubber Ring, and Back to the Old House. Again, the first LP release of the Smiths studio recording of Back to the Old House, because the version on Hatful of Hollow is a Peel session. Then we also have side 4, Hand in Glove, the single version of that. Stretch Out and Wait, that is the actual B-side version, not the alternate vocal. Please, 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 Let Me Get What I Want. This Night Has Opened My Eyes, which is the Peel session version, which is on Hatful of Hollow, which was also, by the way, played live at the last Smith show on the 17th of December 1986. And then finally we get Unlovable and Rubber Ring. No, not Unlovable. We get Unlovable and Asleep together. And that is my version of it. I mean, yes, I have to lift the needle and skip a couple of tracks, but my preferred version of the albums is Louder Than Bombs, because it's got the tracks from the Sheila Take A Bow single on, and they are magnificent. I absolutely love them to itty bitty bits. Louder Than Bombs is Morrissey's favourite Smiths cover. World Won't Listen is Johnny Marr's favourite Smiths cover. These two albums are essential parts of the Smiths discography. You can't really know the Smiths without having these two records, and I think you have to have both of them. If you absolutely positively got to have only one, go for Louder Than Bombs. It's got more tracks on it, but if you can, go for both. Talking of which, I think I've got a duplicate of the Rough Trade version of World Won't Listen, so if any of you want it, let me know. I'll post it to you, unless you're like in Botswana or Australia or somewhere. If you're in the UK, I'll post it to you for free. But there you go. That is The World Won't Listen and Louder Than Bombs. At the same point, all of this was happening. The band were recording all of the material that went on Panic and Ask, whilst The Queen Is Dead was just about to be released. And whilst The World Won't Listen and Louder Than Bombs were being released and the singles were being released, the band were in the midst of recording Strange Ways Here We Come. I think it's fair to say that if you'd have been the guitarist in the Smiths at this point, you'd be knackered and you'd want a break. But that is what happens when we talk about Strange Ways Here We Come, the final Smiths studio album, which I'll probably get to in a couple of months. The last live appearance by the Smiths where they actually performed live, as far as I understand it, was on the Tube on the 10th of April 1987, which is on this unofficial bootleg CD, a 7-inch, I'm proud to say. This one, according to the label, is a band called The Greys. It's not, it's the Smiths, featuring Take A Bow, Sheila Take A Bow, and Shoplifters of the World Unite on side A. The last two songs performed by the Smiths live, although there was, I think, a version of Shoplifters that was mimed at San Remo in Italy 2 weeks later. And then on the B-side, recordings from UK television of This Charming Man and a Glasgow version of Girl Afraid. Next time I talk about the Smiths is going to be Strange Ways Here We Come, which we're going to go deep into the band because there's so much to talk about around that. And Strange Ways Here We Come is overlooked because it becomes, to a lot of people, the soundtrack to the Smiths splitting up. Which is a very unusual experience, and I think it was something that nobody really expected to happen, but that is all what comes next. So thank you for making it to the end of 61 minutes and 43 seconds of me talking about a Smiths compilation album that's almost as long as the album itself. Hopefully you've enjoyed the ride, and I will see you on the next one. So as usual, don't forget to subscribe, stay beautiful, take care of yourselves and each other. And yeah, you know, that's it really. I haven't thought of a witty way to end the show, so thank you, and see you all soon. Good night. Bye.